What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? Emily Carter sat on the worn-out recliner in her dim living room, staring at the silent laptop screen, the buffering icon spinning endlessly like a cruel joke. Outside, the winds howled across the plains of rural Montana, and the cold seeped through the old wooden frame of her small rental house. She rubbed her temples, her eyes burning from tears she didn't want her kids to see. Her youngest, Ellie, 7 years old with cheeks still red from the cold, tugged at her sleeve, asking when she could go back to her virtual reading group. Emily lied. "Soon, sweetie. Mommy just needs to fix the Wi-Fi." But there was no fixing it. Their outdated satellite internet dish had been useless since the snowstorm 3 days ago. Emily had done everything, reset the modem, re-aimed the dish, even prayed, but nothing worked. And now the job that had kept food on their table, her remote counseling sessions for at-risk teens across the state, was slipping away. Her inbox was filled with missed appointments, unanswered cries for help, and a final warning from the district: no more missed days. They would have to let her go. She bit her lip and stared at her cracked phone, desperate for a signal. A single bar flickered for a second before disappearing again. Her oldest, Max, 13, sat on the couch next to Ellie, trying to distract her with card games while glancing at his mother with quiet understanding. He was too young to carry adult worries, but here he was, shouldering them without a word. Emily stood up and paced. Her thoughts spun with dread. No internet meant no job. No job meant no rent. No rent meant losing everything. Again. She had already been there once, after the divorce, after her mother died, after the school closed during the pandemic. She clawed her way back from the edge, built a career out of nothing, turned their living room into a lifeline for kids who had no one. Now it was all falling apart again. She walked to the window and stared at the snow-covered horizon, whispering, "Why now?" The world was moving faster, digital, connected. But here, in the middle of nowhere, she was stuck in the past. And worse, her kids were, too. She opened her phone's browser one more time, hoping. The homepage took minutes to load, but finally, a headline appeared: Elon Musk unveils Starlink Mini, high-speed internet in a backpack. Her breath caught. The video was grainy, but she played it anyway. There he was, Elon Musk, standing on a stage, holding a small white square about the size of a lunchbox. "This," he said, "is Starlink Mini. Plug it into any outlet, point it at the sky, and you've got fast, reliable internet, anywhere." He smiled, almost casually. Even in the middle of nowhere. The crowd laughed, but Emily didn't. Her heart pounded. This wasn't just a gadget. This was her miracle. The video continued. The device cost less than half of traditional satellite dishes, could be shipped anywhere in the US, and was designed for mobility. It was launching in select regions within weeks. Her fingers trembled as she clicked on the pre-order link. The page failed to load. She cursed under her breath, then tried again. Nothing. She slammed the laptop shut. The moment of hope was gone as quickly as it came. She turned to Max. "We're going to the library." He raised an eyebrow. "In this weather?" "Bundle up," she said. "We're walking." The nearest public library with Wi-Fi was 5 miles away. Their car's engine had frozen over the night before, but Emily was out of options. She wrapped Ellie in layers, zipped Max into his dad's old jacket, and they stepped out into the white silence. Wind cut into her skin, but she leaned forward and kept walking, boots crunching in the snow. Halfway there, Ellie started crying, her little legs too tired. Max offered to carry her. Emily kissed his forehead and pressed on. By the time they reached the library, her legs were numb, but the building's warm interior hit her like sunlight. She led the kids to the computer area, logged in, and searched again: Starlink Mini Rural Access Application. A non-profit link appeared: Rural Reach Foundation, offering limited Starlink Mini devices to families in need. Emily filled out the form with shaking hands. She wrote about her work, her kids, how she helped others when no one helped her. She clicked submit and whispered, please. Then she turned to the kids. We'll just wait and see. That night, back home, the house was colder than ever. Emily lit candles to save electricity. She made ramen noodles and served them in silence. The kids didn't complain. Max even tried to make a joke, but his eyes were tired. Before bed, she wrapped them in blankets, kissed them goodnight, and stared at the ceiling. Her mind raced. What if the application was denied? What if help came too late? She opened her phone one more time, and a weak signal appeared. She went to TikTok, where her last video, about losing her internet, had gained a few views. She uploaded a new one, shaky but honest. If you're watching this, she said, I'm a single mom in Montana. I'm a counselor. I help kids, but now I'm the one who needs help. My internet's gone. My job's on the line. I just applied for something called Starlink Mini. If you know anyone who can help, please hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? She ended the video and pressed upload. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the fear of silence. Of no reply. The next morning, she woke up to a surprise. Her phone buzzed repeatedly. Messages. Hundreds. Comments from strangers. One said, I'm in Texas. Praying for you. Another, we have the same problem in Idaho. You're not alone. Then one more, I know someone at the Rural Reach Foundation. DM me. Emily sat upright, the screen glowing with life. She felt the tiniest spark in her chest. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone out there was listening. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside her soul, something had shifted. A signal was coming. Emily Carter wasn't born to be a fighter, but life didn't ask. It demanded. Before the remote counseling job, before the blinking modem and the sleepless nights, there had been dreams, quiet ones. A big city childhood with small-town roots, she had always been the girl who stayed after school to help, who offered tissues to crying classmates, who listened more than she spoke. Her mother, Diana, had been the pillar of their tiny two-bedroom apartment in Denver, a fierce, full-time nurse who taught Emily the value of staying steady when everything else trembled. Diana had this way of looking straight into Emily's soul and saying, your heart's too big for silence. Emily believed her. She studied psychology in college, wrote essays about resilience and trauma, and imagined a life where she would sit across from people and help them find light again. But life is cruel to planners. She met Scott in her junior year, a charming marketing major with a sharp jawline and a smile that made her forget to breathe. They married fast, too fast. By the time Max was born, Scott was already bored with the small dreams. He wanted movement, parties, money, Vegas. Emily wanted stability, a garden, a front porch swing. They clashed quietly at first, then loudly, then not at all. The silence was worse. When Ellie came, Emily thought maybe things would change. But babies don't fix broken glass. One night, after a long fight over nothing and everything, Scott packed a single bag and left. No note, no apology. Just emptiness. He sent money for a few months, then stopped. Last she heard, he was in Arizona, selling real estate and dating a yoga instructor. Emily filed for divorce, cried in court, wiped her tears in the parking lot, and never looked back. She moved to Montana because it was the only place she could afford to start over. Her mother had passed by then, lung cancer, too fast, too cruel, and Emily needed quiet. She needed space to breathe, to figure out who she was without a man, without a mother, without a plan. Max was 8, Ellie still in diapers. She picked up a job at a diner, worked nights, studied online during the day. Slowly, she got her license in counseling, focused on trauma recovery for teens. She started offering free sessions over Zoom to local kids, then expanded her reach. When the pandemic hit, her services exploded. Schools were shutting down, kids were falling through cracks, and Emily became a lifeline. Word spread. She partnered with small school districts, offered free group sessions, late-night helplines, and crisis response for students who had no one else. She had a gift: she could speak gently but firmly, dig through layers without making kids feel exposed. Her sessions weren't therapy, not officially, but they were something better: real, human connection in a world that suddenly lacked it. Emily found purpose in the digital silence. She bought second-hand equipment, turned her kitchen into an office, and built a routine around healing others. And for a while, it worked. She found strength in routine, in watching Max learn to cook simple meals or Ellie fall asleep curled next to her on the couch. They didn't have much, no vacations, no brand names. But they had rhythm. They had warmth. Emily taught herself coding basics, how to troubleshoot routers, how to navigate Google Classroom like a pro. She wasn't tech-savvy by nature, but necessity made her sharp. She once built a virtual peer support group for middle school girls with just Canva, a private Zoom link, and sheer will. Her inbox overflowed with stories: kids dealing with loss, abandonment, depression, anxiety, self-harm. Emily didn't flinch. She responded to each one like it was her own child. But she couldn't save everyone. One day, she got a message too late: a girl named Jada from Idaho, only 14, who had reached out once but never again. Emily never forgot her. Her photo stayed in a folder on Emily's desktop titled, "Hearts I Couldn't Reach." It haunted her, quietly pushing her to try harder. That folder was why she stayed up late every night reading about satellite technology, learning the ugly truth about digital inequality. Her town, like thousands of others, was on the losing end of a global race toward connectivity. While cities debated 5G towers and AI ethics, Emily was dealing with snow-blocked signals and routers from 2008. Her community wasn't just underserved. It was invisible. She knew mothers who drove to Walmart parking lots so their kids could submit homework. Fathers who built homemade antennae from scrap metal. Grandparents who couldn't attend virtual funerals because the stream kept freezing. And yet, somehow, the rest of the country moved on, assuming everyone had bars on their phones and clouds in their skies. Emily became angry. Not the explosive kind, but the slow-burning kind that curls in your stomach and whispers, "Do something." She wrote emails to state reps, tweeted politely at broadband companies, shared stories from families like hers. No one listened. Until now. Until Starlink Mini. The idea that someone, anyone, had designed something specifically for people like her, for families who had been told they weren't worth the infrastructure, lit a fire in her chest. That night, after the video upload, Emily scrolled through the comments until her thumbs went numb. Messages poured in. A teacher from Ohio offered a donation. A grandmother from Utah said she used Starlink for telehealth and it saved her life. But it was one message, short and simple, that stood out: "I can help. I've got a direct line to the Rural Reach program. DM me your info." Emily's hands shook as she typed a reply. The stranger's profile was bare, just a photo of a mountain range and the name, Carlos J. She hesitated for a second, then sent her story, her location, her struggle. Minutes later, a reply pinged back: "Hang tight. I'm making a call." Emily didn't sleep that night. Her mind spun through memories of her mother's voice, of Scott's departure, of Ellie's laughter and Max's quiet strength. She thought about the first time she held a counseling book in college and whispered, "This is what I was made for." She thought about Jada. By morning, she had a message from Carlos. Application bumped to top of list. Expect a call within 48 hours. You're doing important work. Don't stop. Emily stared at the screen, the words glowing like sunlight on water. She whispered a thank you, not just to Carlos, but to the universe, to her mother, to anyone who might be listening. She closed her eyes and pictured the white square from the video, the Starlink Mini. So small. So simple. So powerful. A device that could change everything. Not just for her, but for every invisible family left behind by the digital age. She took a deep breath, stood up, and went to make breakfast. It wasn't over. Not yet. But for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning of something new. The sun rose weakly over the snow-covered hills, casting long, pale shadows across the road in front of Emily Carter's house, but inside the warmth never came. The heat clicked on sporadically, groaning through the old vents, trying its best against the -10 wind chill outside. Emily stood in the kitchen with her coat still on, clutching her phone in one hand and the edge of the countertop with the other. She had just opened her email, hoping for some glimmer of hope from Rural Reach or the school district or anyone, but instead, she saw the subject line that made her knees weak: final notice, termination of contract. She clicked and read, eyes darting over the cold, bureaucratic language. Due to non-compliance with connectivity requirements and repeated communication failures, your services are no longer required effective immediately. That was it. No thank you for your years of work. No mention of the students she helped through mental breakdowns or the nights she stayed up past midnight comforting suicidal teens on unstable Wi-Fi. No acknowledgement of the fact that she lost internet during a blizzard and had walked through the snow just to submit paperwork. Just a cold goodbye, another door slammed in her face. She closed her eyes and pressed her hand against her chest, willing herself not to cry. She couldn't cry. Not now. Max was sitting at the table trying to do math on paper from a packet the school had sent home as backup, and Ellie was on the floor coloring the same rainbow over and over. Emily turned off the screen, put her phone in a drawer, and tried to steady her breathing. Mom. Max looked up, voice soft. Everything okay? She turned to him and forced a smile. Just a little hiccup, sweetheart. Nothing we can't handle. But it was a lie. Everything about their lives lately felt like one long string of little hiccups that turned into a full-body collapse. The electricity bill was overdue, the refrigerator was half empty, and their car had officially given up 2 mornings ago. She had scraped together enough coins to send Max to the corner store for a gallon of milk and eggs, but he'd come back with neither, saying they were out and the prices were too high anyway. She thought about calling her sister, Rachel, but every time they spoke it ended in the same argument. Rachel didn't understand why Emily had moved to Montana. She said it was reckless. She offered a spare room in her Phoenix condo, but Emily didn't want to uproot the kids again. She didn't want to be pitted. And Rachel always had that way of turning concern into judgment, like Emily's misfortunes were the result of poor planning rather than sheer bad luck and systemic failure. Still, with trembling fingers, she opened her contact list and pressed Rachel's name. It rang 3 times before she picked up. Emily. Hey, Emily said, voice tight. I just needed to hear a familiar voice. Rachel's tone softened. What's going on? Emily swallowed hard. They let me go. The school. I have no internet. No work. The car's dead. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Silence stretched through the line before Rachel spoke. Why are you still there, Em? I told you this months ago. You can't build a future in a place that's stuck in the past. It's not that simple. You've got 2 kids and no income. Come here. We'll figure it out together. I can't, Emily snapped, then regretted it instantly. I'm sorry. I want to make this work. I don't want to keep running. Rachel sighed. Sometimes staying put is the same as running, just in place. The call ended with no resolution, just an echo of their lifelong dynamic, Rachel, always the practical one with options, and Emily, clinging to idealism and a barely working heater. She sat down, buried her face in her hands, and tried to figure out what to do next. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carlos. "Check your email. Just sent you something." She opened her laptop again, borrowing a hotspot from her phone's single blinking bar, and after several tries, the email loaded. It was from Rural Reach. Subject: Confirmation of Starlink Mini Application, Priority Status. The message read, "Dear Ms. Carter, due to your current circumstances and community role, your application has been expedited. A pilot device may be available for delivery within 10 to 14 business days pending confirmation." Emily read it twice, then 3 times, her heart thudding against her ribs. A pilot device. 10 to 14 days. Could she make it until then? Did she have any more fight left? She didn't know. But at least it wasn't a no. It was something. That night, she scraped together a dinner of grilled cheese and canned soup. Max and Ellie laughed at the way the cheese stretched, making silly noises. She managed to laugh with them, a sound that felt strange in her own throat. After dinner, she tucked Ellie into the tiny bed they shared, then walked outside onto the porch. The sky was wide and brutal, the stars like pinpricks in the endless black. She exhaled and watched her breath cloud in the air. The silence was so complete that it rang in her ears. Then, somewhere in the distance, she heard tires crunching on snow. Her heart jumped. No one came down this road after dark. She stepped off the porch, squinting toward the sound, and saw headlights bouncing through the darkness. A dusty old truck came into view, slowing as it neared her house. The engine coughed before cutting out. The door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, bundled in a thick coat, carrying something under one arm. "Emily Carter," he called. "Yes," she answered, wary. He approached slowly and held out a white device, sleek, compact, the size of a book. "Carlos sent me. I'm with the pilot program." Emily's mouth dropped open. "This can't be real." "It's real," the man said with a smile. "You're one of the first. No one knows we're dropping them yet." But Carlos pulled some strings. Emily took the device, fingers trembling. How does it work?" "Plug it in. Point it at the sky. Wait 30 seconds. You'll have internet speeds faster than the city." He handed her a paper with setup instructions and a customer service number scribbled in pen. "I've got 3 more deliveries tonight. But Carlos said you'd be awake." He was right. Then, with a nod, the man turned and disappeared into the truck, and the night swallowed him. Emily stood frozen for a moment, heart racing. Then she bolted inside. Max sat on the couch, watching her with wide eyes. "What's that?" "Our future," she whispered. She followed the instructions. Plugged it in. A green light blinked. She pointed the device through the kitchen window toward the sky. The light stabilized. She opened her laptop, connected to the new network, and ran a test. The page loaded instantly. Crystal clear. No buffering. She clicked on one of her online class platforms. All the tools opened. She opened Zoom. No delay. No lag. Max gasped. "It's working. It's working," she breathed. She collapsed into a chair and stared at the glowing screen, a strange pressure lifting from her chest. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't stuck. She wasn't frozen. She was connected. Really, truly connected. It felt like breathing after being underwater. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was about to change. The hum of the heater kicked in just as Emily Carter leaned back in her chair, eyes locked on the screen in front of her as if it might vanish if she blinked. The Starlink Mini sat quietly on the windowsill, small and unassuming, glowing with a steady green light like a heartbeat, a silent affirmation that for once, the world hadn't forgotten her. Max hovered behind her, holding his tablet, hesitating to believe the speed test he had just watched. "Is it really gonna stay like this?" he asked, his voice low with disbelief. Emily smiled without turning around. "We're not buffering, are we?" He let out a half laugh and dropped onto the couch, pulling Ellie onto his lap. She squealed with joy as the cartoon on her tablet streamed without a hitch, bright and smooth. Emily had forgotten how different the house felt when the internet just worked. No frozen screens, no missed calls, no sudden blackouts. The silence was replaced by the hum of life, music, laughter, emails flowing in. The kitchen that had once felt like a failing command center now buzzed like a nerve center for possibility. But Emily didn't waste a second. She logged back into her email, the district's telehealth portal, and began sending out messages. Her absence had disrupted everything, but she was back now. She offered makeup sessions, reassurances, late-night support hours. The responses trickled in first, then flooded. "Miss Carter. We thought something happened to you. I'm so glad you're okay. Can I still talk to you? I really need to talk. When's your next availability?" It took her breath away. Even after being offline for almost 2 weeks, the students still wanted her. Trusted her. Needed her. She made coffee and worked for hours, scheduling one-on-ones, rescheduling group sessions, emailing parents, checking in with teachers. Her inbox was a mosaic of urgency and hope, a reminder that her work had always mattered even when the world didn't seem to notice. When the kids went to bed, she sat on the floor next to the wall outlet where the Starlink Mini was plugged in and stared at it like it was sacred. She whispered a thank you, not just to Carlos or the anonymous delivery driver, but to Elon Musk or whoever on the design team thought to build something that could carry people like her out of the dark. The next morning, the sky was bright and blue, almost offensively cheerful compared to the heavy weight of the previous week. Emily made a real breakfast, pancakes from scratch, eggs from the neighbor's farm down the road, and felt a sliver of normalcy settle in. Max did his schoolwork online without asking for help. Ellie danced to music on the Bluetooth speaker. Emily prepared for her first session back with a teenager named Brooke, who had severe anxiety and had been unreachable since Emily's last call dropped mid-conversation. When they connected again on Zoom, Brooke's face lit up. "I thought you ghosted me," she said, half joking. "Never," Emily said gently. "My internet went out, but I'm back now. I'm not going anywhere." For the next hour, they talked about grounding exercises, breathing patterns, intrusive thoughts. Brooke was quiet but engaged, clinging to every word like it mattered. Emily realized how deeply these sessions went for some kids, how much more this was than just a job. It was a thread between isolation and connection. After the session, Emily stepped outside and breathed in the clean Montana air. It smelled like frost and pine and wood smoke. Her phone buzzed in her hand, a number she didn't recognize flashing across the screen. She answered, unsure. "Emily Carter," the voice asked, crisp and professional. "Yes. This is Rachel Atwood from the Big Sky Education Council. We heard from the district that your contract was terminated recently." Emily blinked, unsure if this was a prank or an insult. "That's correct. Well, some of our partner schools have been watching your online sessions. We're interested in possibly contracting you directly. Independent mental health consultants are in short supply, and your style resonates with students. Would you be open to a short-term pilot program?" Emily's mouth went dry. I'd love to hear more. We're offering a 6-week program, stipend-based, remote. We can send you the agreement by the end of the day. Your application through Rural Reach flagged your case for us. I believe a man named Carlos mentioned your work. Emily could barely believe it. Yes, he's the one who got me the Starlink Mini. Smart man, Rachel said. He's building a small revolution, and you're clearly part of it. They discussed logistics, and by the end of the call, Emily had the outline of a new income stream and an official partnership forming. She texted Carlos after, unable to keep the words in. You didn't just help me connect, you got me seen. Thank you. He replied only with, keep going. You're not done yet. That evening, she hosted her first group support circle again, 6 teens from 4 states, each square on the screen flickering with cautious faces. She welcomed them back, and they began talking about stress, midterms, family tension, mental health. One of them, a quiet boy named Aiden from northern Wisconsin, unmuted himself near the end. I wanted to say thanks, he said. When your signal dropped last time, I thought it meant I shouldn't bother anymore. But when you came back, it kinda gave me permission to try again too. Emily's throat closed with emotion. We're all allowed to try again, she said softly. That's why we're here. The kids nodded, some smiling shyly. She ended the session and sat for a long time in the glow of the screen. This wasn't just about being online. This was about being alive. The internet didn't just power a job, it powered connection, healing, community. And now that she had it, she wasn't going to waste it. But Emily knew she couldn't rely on one Starlink Mini forever. She began researching ways to expand. Grants, non-profit partnerships, digital equity organizations. She found stories like hers everywhere, mothers in Mississippi, grandfathers in South Dakota, veterans in Alaska, all cut off by geography and circumstance. She started collecting those stories, emailing reporters, creating a digital scrapbook of America's invisible digital divide. She knew the technology existed now. The question was, who would get it? And who would be left behind? Days passed, then a week. Emily worked around the clock, meeting with new clients, organizing webinars for parents, creating support guides for teachers. She hosted a town hall over Zoom for other families in her area, explaining what Starlink Mini was, how it worked, and how to apply. Some were skeptical, others desperate. She offered her help to each one. Word spread. Her inbox filled with messages from strangers, from counselors across the country asking how she pulled it off. She kept replying. She kept going. Then one night, another call came through. Carlos. Not just a message this time, a video call. His background looked like an office, cluttered with routers, cables, and papers. You're making noise, he said with a half smile. Good noise. I hope so, Emily replied, leaning into the camera. Because I'm not done. He nodded. We've got a few more devices being returned from testing. I want to send them your way. You think you can find good homes for them? Her eyes lit up. Absolutely. I already have a list. Then we're just getting started, he said. They talked strategy for the next hour, planning how to quietly distribute more units under the radar, how to advocate without getting caught in red tape. Emily felt alive again, a fire lit in her that she hadn't felt in years. After the call, she walked outside and stared at the sky. Stars scattered across the darkness like secrets waiting to be heard. She looked back at the house, at the glow in her windows, at the future unfolding inside. The signal had come. And with it, hope. It started with a single Facebook post. Emily didn't think much of it when she wrote it, just a snapshot of the Starlink Mini glowing in the evening light, a caption underneath that read, for the first time in months, I'm fully connected. This device brought my counseling services back from the edge. To whoever thought rural families like mine didn't matter. You were wrong. Thank you, #Starlink Mini. She hit post and put her phone down to fold laundry, expecting maybe a few friends to like it, maybe a comment or two. But when she picked it back up an hour later, the post had over 300 shares. By morning, it passed 4,000. Her inbox filled with messages from parents, teachers, small-town librarians, even pastors asking how they could get one too. And then came the reporters. A tech columnist from Oregon sent a DM. A rural education blog wanted to feature her. A small Montana news station offered a Zoom interview. Emily hesitated at first, unsure if stepping into the spotlight was the right move, but Carlos reassured her. The more attention we get, the faster we can push for distribution. Tell your story. Be honest. That's your superpower. So she did. She sat in her kitchen, hair tied back, the kids in the next room, and gave her first ever on-camera interview. She told them about her counseling work, about the moment she lost connection and thought her purpose had disappeared, about the night a stranger delivered hope in a white plastic shell. She explained how Starlink Mini didn't just provide fast internet, it gave her life back. The story aired the next night, and within hours, it went viral. Bigger media outlets picked it up. Hashtags started circulating. Hashtag rural reach, hashtag Starlink for all, hashtag digital hope. And soon, it wasn't just about Emily anymore. Other families began posting their own Starlink mini stories. Ranchers using them to manage livestock sensors, tribal elders reconnecting with healthcare providers, students attending school from miles off-grid without interruption for the first time. Emily compiled all the stories into a shared document, adding dates, locations, quotes. She called it The Connected Heartland. She sent it to journalists, advocacy groups, and eventually, with trembling hands, to Starlink's corporate outreach email. She didn't expect anything from that last one, just felt it was right. But then one morning, while making toast and helping Ellie pick out socks, she got a call from an unknown California number. "This is Natasha from Starlink Community Initiatives," the woman on the line said. "I read your document. It was powerful. Elon wants to know more." Emily's mind went blank. "Elon who?" "Musk," Natasha said. "We'd like to invite you to a roundtable with other early pilot recipients to share feedback directly with the engineering team." Emily sat down slowly. "I'm just a counselor from Montana. You're the reason we're paying attention now. You're not just anything." The following week moved like a whirlwind. Starlink sent her a travel stipend and a list of questions to prepare. The roundtable was virtual, but high-level, product leads, technical designers, outreach staff. Emily bought a new blouse from the thrift store, pressed it, and set up her laptop at the cleanest angle she could manage. On the day of the meeting, she stared into the lens like it was the biggest moment of her life, because it was. They asked about her experience, setup time, speed, reliability. She told them everything. Then they asked why it mattered. She told them about the girl who had reached out once, then never again. She told them about Ellie dancing to clear music for the first time, and Max doing math homework without tears. She told them about the families who had messaged her since, begging for access, saying they'd do anything, pay anything, walk miles if they had to. She told them that in places like hers, a blinking light on a white box could be the difference between isolation and survival. The room fell silent after she finished. Then one of the engineers, a woman with sharp eyes and tired features, unmuted herself. "I grew up in a town like that," she said. "I never thought I'd get to help someone like my mom from the inside. Thank you for this." Natasha followed up later that evening. "We're pushing to expand distribution," she said. "You'll start seeing more devices drop in areas like yours soon. Quietly for now, but it's happening." Emily sat back in her chair and felt something she hadn't felt in years, momentum. She wasn't fighting upstream anymore. The current was shifting. Meanwhile, in town, word was spreading. A local high school teacher reached out to Emily, asking if she could speak to a group of seniors about digital equity and resilience. "You're becoming kind of a hometown hero," the teacher said with a laugh. Emily laughed too, even though she didn't quite believe it. But she agreed to go. She stood in front of 30 18-year-olds, some leaning back in their chairs with arms crossed, others curious. She told them her story, but not like a speech. More like a question: what would you do if the world told you your voice didn't matter because your zip code didn't have fiber? Some shrugged. One girl raised her hand. I'd scream louder. That's what I'm doing now, Emily said. And it's working. She left that classroom buzzing with ideas. Maybe she could start a mentorship program. Maybe she could train counselors in other towns to use virtual tools the way she had. Maybe, just maybe, she could write a book. Carlos texted her again later that night. Just got word. Your zip code's getting 200 more devices over the next 3 months. Want to help coordinate distribution? Emily laughed out loud. Absolutely. I already made a list. They launched a small volunteer group: neighbors, teachers, librarians. She called it the Signal Circle. Their mission: find the families most in need and get them online, no red tape, no delays. She created flyers, set up an application form, and spent weekends going door to door with a clipboard and a smile. Some were skeptical. Others cried when she showed them what Starlink Mini could do. The network grew fast. One day, Max came home from school and said, "Mom, my teacher used your story in class today." Emily blinked. Was it weird? No. It was cool, he said. I told them you're kind of a big deal now. She ruffled his hair, heart swelling. You're the big deal, Max. You and Ellie. You're why I started this. That night, as the kids slept, Emily sat alone in the kitchen, the glow of the Starlink Mini steady beside her. She opened a new document titled "The Signal That Changed Everything." She didn't know if it would become a blog, a book, or just a letter to herself, but she needed to write it. She wrote about the silence before the connection, the desperation before the light. She wrote about how no one talks about what it means to feel invisible in your own country, and how technology, real, thoughtful, intentional technology, could make people feel seen again. She ended the first page with a simple line: "This story isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to anyone who's ever looked up at the sky and prayed for a signal." And she hit save. The snow began to melt in slow, muddy patches by the end of March, and the dirt roads that cut through Emily Carter's town turned to thick slush, difficult for old tires and impossible for shoes without deep treads. But still, Emily walked. With a canvas bag over her shoulder and her clipboard tucked beneath her arm, she visited house after house, each one a different story, each one a new connection waiting to be made. They had already distributed 17 Starlink Minis in the past 3 weeks, all across the county, and the calls kept coming. Emily had stopped being surprised by the desperation in people's voices, the pleading, the cautious hope layered behind every question. Do you still have one left? I've got a grandson who can't do his homework. I've been trying to apply for disability online for 2 years. My daughter wants to take college classes but we can't keep a signal. Emily didn't have answers for everything, but she had something close. She had access. She had a list. And thanks to Carlos and Starlink's quiet expansion, she had a growing inventory. Word traveled fast in towns like hers. The local church began letting her host info sessions in the evenings. The town library cleared a shelf just for her flyers and sign-up forms. Even the grocery store manager taped her contact card to the front counter next to the hand sanitizer. What began as a quiet pilot program was turning into a grassroots movement, and Emily had become its unofficial leader. But leadership came with pressure. She stayed up until 2 in the morning most nights, answering emails, setting up delivery schedules, creating simple digital literacy guides for families who didn't grow up with screens. Some of the homes she visited had never used a Wi-Fi network before. One woman had burst into tears when Emily showed her how to video call her son in Anchorage. I haven't seen his face in over a year, she sobbed, hands trembling. We used to talk every week, then the landline went out and I couldn't afford to fix it. Emily stayed for tea after that visit, listened to stories about the woman's husband who had passed last winter and the garden she used to grow. That was the thing Emily never expected. How much of this was about healing, not just connection. The internet wasn't just a utility. In these parts, it was an emotional lifeline. It restored more than signal. It restored dignity. Every new connection came with its own moment of magic. A teenage boy in an isolated cabin logging into his first coding class. A farmhand applying for jobs without driving 50 miles to town. A widow joining a grief support group she didn't know existed. Every story added fuel to Emily's mission, but it also wore her down. She hadn't taken a day off since the Starlink Mini arrived. Her kids noticed. "You're always working," Max said one morning over cereal. "Even on Sundays." Emily sighed and reached for his hand. "I know, sweetheart. I'm just trying to help people." He didn't say anything, just looked down at his bowl. Later that night, after they went to bed, she sighed, others curious. She told them her story, but not like a speech. More like a question. What would you do if the world told you your voice didn't matter because your zip code didn't have fiber? Some shrugged. One girl raised her hand. "I'd scream louder." "That's what I'm doing now," Emily said. "And it's working." She left that classroom buzzing with ideas. Maybe she could start a mentorship program. Maybe she could train counselors in other towns to use virtual tools the way she had. Maybe, just maybe, she could write a book. Carlos texted her again later that night. "Just got word, your zip code's getting 200 more devices over the next 3 months. Want to help coordinate distribution?" Emily laughed out loud. "Absolutely. I already made a list." They launched a small volunteer group, neighbors, teachers, librarians. She called it the Signal Circle. Their mission: find the families most in need and get them online, no red tape, no delays. She created flyers, set up an application form, and spent weekends going door to door with a clipboard and a smile. Some were skeptical. Others cried when she showed them what Starlink Mini could do. The network grew fast. One day, Max came home from school and said, "Mom, my teacher used your story in class today." Emily blinked. Was it weird? No. It was cool, he said. "I told them you're kind of a big deal now." She ruffled his hair, heart swelling. "You're the big deal, Max. You and Ellie. You're why I started this." That night, as the kids slept, Emily sat alone in the kitchen, the glow of the Starlink Mini steady beside her. She opened a new document titled "The Signal That Changed Everything." She didn't know if it would become a blog, a book, or just a letter to herself, but she needed to write it. She wrote about the silence before the connection, the desperation before the light. She wrote about how no one talks about what it means to feel invisible in your own country, and how technology, real, thoughtful, intentional technology, could make people feel seen again. She ended the first page with a simple line. "This story isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to anyone who's ever looked up at the sky and prayed for a signal." And she hit save. The snow began to melt in slow, muddy patches by the end of March, and the dirt roads that cut through Emily Carter's town turned to thick slush, difficult for old tires and impossible for shoes without deep treads. But still, Emily walked. With a canvas bag over her shoulder and her clipboard tucked beneath her arm, she visited house after house, each one a different story, each one a new connection waiting to be made. They had already distributed 17 Starlink Minis in the past 3 weeks, all across the county, and the calls kept coming. Emily had stopped being surprised by the desperation in people's voices, the pleading, the cautious hope layered behind every question. "Do you still have one left? I've got a grandson who can't do his homework. I've been trying to apply for disability online for 2 years. My daughter wants to take college classes but we can't keep a signal." Emily didn't have answers for everything, but she had something close. She had access. She had a list. And thanks to Carlos and Starlink's quiet expansion, she had a growing inventory. Word traveled fast in towns like hers. The local church began letting her host info sessions in the evenings. The town library cleared a shelf just for her flyers and sign-up forms. Even the grocery store manager taped her contact card to the front counter next to the hand sanitizer. What began as a quiet pilot program was turning into a grassroots movement, and Emily had become its unofficial leader. But leadership came with pressure. She stayed up until 2 in the morning most nights, answering emails, setting up delivery schedules, creating simple digital literacy guides for families who didn't grow up with screens. Some of the homes she visited had never used a Wi-Fi network before. One woman had burst into tears when Emily showed her how to video call her son in Anchorage. "I haven't seen his face in over a year," she sobbed, hands trembling. "We used to talk every week, then the landline went out and I couldn't afford to fix it." Emily stayed for tea after that visit, listened to stories about the woman's husband who had passed last winter and the garden she used to grow. That was the thing Emily never expected, how much of this was about healing, not just connection. The internet wasn't just a utility. In these parts, it was an emotional lifeline. It restored more than signal. It restored dignity. Every new connection came with its own moment of magic. A teenage boy in an isolated cabin logging into his first coding class. A farmhand applying for jobs without driving 50 miles to town. A widow joining a grief support group she didn't know existed. Every story added fuel to Emily's mission, but it also wore her down. She hadn't taken a day off since the Starlink Mini arrived. Her kids noticed. "You're always working," Max said one morning over cereal. "Even on Sundays." Emily sighed and reached for his hand. "I know, sweetheart. I'm just trying to help people." He didn't say anything, just looked down at his bowl. Later that night, after they went to bed, she sat staring at the Starlink signal light, its soft green glow like a quiet reminder. She opened her notebook and wrote a single line, "Helping others shouldn't mean losing myself." The next morning, she called Rachel. Her sister answered with her usual blend of guarded affection. "Hey," she said, "what's wrong?" "Nothing," Emily replied. "Actually, I just wanted to hear your voice. And say I'm sorry. For everything." Rachel was quiet for a beat. "You don't owe me an apology, Em. But I appreciate it. You were right about some things. I couldn't make this work alone. I needed help. And I'm still learning how to ask for it." "We all are," Rachel said softly. "I'm proud of you, you know. You've always had that fight in you. I just wish you didn't always feel like you had to fight alone." Emily smiled. "I'm working on that." They spoke for a long time, about the kids, about their parents, about the future. It felt good. Like home. When they hung up, Emily felt lighter. The next few days brought even more change. A reporter from NPR emailed her asking for a formal interview. She agreed, and the resulting segment aired the following Monday during Morning Edition. The response was overwhelming. Donations began pouring in to help fund future Starlink Mini units. A small nonprofit in Colorado offered to partner with her. A school district in rural Utah invited her to speak to their board. Emily was no longer just a local story. She was national. But with visibility came scrutiny. A tech blog published a skeptical article titled, "Is Starlink Mini the real solution for America's digital divide?" It questioned the longevity of the hardware, the environmental impact of low-orbit satellites, and the risk of creating dependency on a single private company. Emily read the article twice. The critiques weren't all wrong. She'd had similar concerns. That night, she called Carlos. "What if they're right?" she asked. "What if we're just patching holes in a sinking ship?" He paused. Maybe we are. But what's the alternative? Let people drown? She laughed despite herself. I guess not. This isn't a permanent fix, he said. But it's a bridge. And we need bridges right now. Until the system catches up, we keep building the planks ourselves. She nodded slowly. You ever think this could get bigger than us? It already is, Carlos said. That's why we need people like you on the ground. You make the data human. Emily took that to heart. She began organizing all her notes and outreach efforts into a formal plan. She drafted a proposal for a statewide rural tech initiative. She called it Project Signal. She shared it with local officials, tribal councils, and eventually, a representative from the Montana Department of Education. To her surprise, they listened. 2 weeks later, she got word, they wanted to pilot Project Signal in 3 counties. Emily stared at the email, stunned. She called Max and Ellie into the room and told them the news. Max grinned wide. Does that mean you're gonna be famous? No, Emily laughed, but maybe it means we helped start something that matters. That weekend, she finally took a day off. They packed a picnic lunch and drove out to the lake, the Starlink Mini unplugged, the screens left behind. They skipped rocks, played tag, watched clouds. For a few hours, there were no calls, no schedules, just the sound of Ellie's laughter and the rhythm of the water lapping at the shore. That night, back home, Emily stood at the window and watched the northern lights flicker faintly in the sky. She thought about all the families still waiting for a signal. All the kids sitting in front of blank screens, the parents stuck between dead zones and desperation. The fight wasn't over. But the tide was turning. The signal was spreading. And she would keep going, one home, one heart, one device at a time. Emily was up before the sun again, the floorboards cool beneath her bare feet, the kettle humming quietly on the stove. The kids were still asleep, their small breathing sounds carrying through the hallway like music. She moved with practiced rhythm now, coffee brewing, emails opening, calendar populating with new names and appointments. She'd come to love this strange hour of quiet preparation before the world roared to life. Except this morning, something felt different. A message blinked at the top of her inbox with the subject line, Urgent, Congressional Rural Tech Briefing. She opened it with a squint, blinking sleep from her eyes. It was from a digital equity consultant she'd met weeks earlier on a Zoom panel. He explained that her work with the Starlink Mini and Project Signal had caught the attention of the Federal Communications Commission, and that a small bipartisan panel on rural infrastructure wanted to hear directly from someone with hands-on experience. We want you to testify, virtually. 5 minutes. Just tell your story. Make it real, the message read. Emily's heart thudded. She reread the email 3 times, unsure if it was a prank, a scam, or the biggest moment of her life. She replied immediately, asking for details, and within an hour she was booked to speak via video the following Thursday, right after a telecom executive and just before a school district superintendent from West Virginia. She stared at her screen for a long time, wondering what words could possibly do justice to the months she'd just lived through. That night, she sat at the kitchen table after the kids were in bed, a blank document open in front of her. 5 minutes wasn't long. But 5 minutes could move mountains if the right words landed. She wrote and rewrote the opening line until finally, she settled on this. What if the only thing standing between a child and their future was a signal they couldn't reach? She built the rest from there. She included Brooke's anxiety, Aiden's honesty, the woman who hadn't seen her son in a year. She mentioned Max, and how he'd stopped asking for help with math because his online classes finally worked. She told them she wasn't a tech expert or a lobbyist, just a mom, a counselor, and someone who knew what it meant to live outside the borders of convenience. On the day of the hearing, she wore her best blazer, her hair pulled back in a low twist. The camera was angled just right. The Starlink Mini sat silently nearby, casting its usual soft green glow. She waited quietly as the panel began. The telecom executive spoke first, rattling off numbers and percentages, growth models and bandwidth capacities. He used words like optimization and capital expenditure. Then the moderator called her name. Emily Carter, rural mental health counselor and founder of Project Signal, you have the floor. She leaned forward, heart pounding, hands clasped in her lap. Good morning, she began, her voice steady but warm. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm speaking to you today from a small town in northern Montana, population 2,311, median income below the national average, and until recently, zero consistent broadband options. She told her story simply, directly. How she lost her connection, her income, her confidence. How the Starlink Mini arrived like a lifeline, unexpected and transformative. How it allowed her to keep counseling kids who had no other mental health support. This isn't just about access to social media or streaming, she said. This is about survival. About dignity. About being seen. She paused to breathe, just once. The people I work with don't need charity. They need infrastructure. They need opportunity. They need the same basic connection that millions of others don't think twice about. And if that connection comes from a satellite, a dish, a backpack-sized box, they don't care. They just want to belong to the future. The moderator thanked her. She muted herself and leaned back, suddenly lightheaded. Messages poured in within minutes. Committee staffers. Journalists. A policy analyst from the Department of Education. Even a state senator from Oregon sent a short but meaningful note, "You made this real. Thank you." Emily exhaled. For once, she didn't cry. She just smiled. That evening, she let Max and Ellie pick dinner, burgers and milkshakes from the one decent place still open late in town. They ate in the truck, music playing low, the kids chatting about school and snow and a new dog someone brought for show and tell. Emily watched them in the rearview mirror, their faces lit by passing headlights, and thought, this is what it's all for. When they got home, she found a voicemail waiting. It was Carlos. You crushed it, he said. They're all buzzing. And we've got new devices inbound. You good to scale this thing? She grinned. I'm ready. Over the next few weeks, the landscape changed rapidly. Starlink announced a formal expansion of the Mini initiative, promising thousands of new units to underserved communities by the end of the year. Project Signal was selected for a federal grant to help fund digital literacy training and satellite internet setup for rural counselors. Emily hired her first 2 part-time staff members, Sarah, a retired teacher who handled coordination, and Jonah, a former IT tech who managed troubleshooting and installations. She trained them herself in the church basement, sitting cross-legged beside Starlink Minis, showing them how to read signal diagnostics and how to walk people through their first Zoom call without condescension. This is more than tech support, she reminded them. This is trust work. Her calendar filled with conferences, interviews, school district meetings. She set office hours and stuck to them. Max noticed. You're not always on your laptop anymore, he said one night as they played cards. I like that. Me too, she said. Balance is a new thing I'm learning. Rachel visited with her family that spring, bringing cookies and hand-me-downs and hugs. The sisters stood out on the porch one night, arms wrapped in blankets, watching the stars wink through the thinning clouds. You did it, Rachel said. You didn't just survive, you built something. Emily nodded slowly. I just wanted to be useful. You've always been useful, Rachel replied. Now you're also visible. That hit Emily harder than she expected. All those years spent invisible behind broken signals, behind polite rejections, behind geographic disinterest, she hadn't realized how deeply she'd internalized the idea that her story didn't count. But now it did. She made it count. That weekend, she returned to the lake with the kids, same spot, same blanket. They brought books this time. No phones. No tablets. Just each other. As the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Emily closed her eyes and breathed deep. The static was gone. The signal was clear. And ahead of her, for the first time in a long time, was a future without silence. By May, the roads had dried, the cattle fields bloomed with wildflowers, and the wind sweeping through Emily's little Montana town no longer carried the bite of frost. It carried a different kind of energy now, one of change. The church basement that had once held bake sales and Sunday crafts now housed 3 folding tables, a whiteboard covered in setup diagrams, and a small army of volunteers sorting through cardboard boxes stamped with the Starlink logo. They were officially a hub, Rural Satellite Unit Number 003, according to a sleek laminated certificate Natasha had mailed from Starlink's community team. But no one here called it that. To them, it was just the grid room. A joke that stuck after Jonah said, "We're building an invisible grid the old map forgot." Emily loved that. She repeated it often. Because that's exactly what it felt like, they were weaving signal into forgotten corners of America, house by house, story by story. But as the good days rolled in, more devices deployed, more families connected, more community centers reaching out, something began to shift. Not everyone welcomed the change. One morning, Emily arrived to find a torn flyer taped to the church doors. It had red block letters scrawled over her photo, "This isn't what we voted for." No name. No return address. Just the sting of confrontation. She stood there in the early light, hand frozen near the doorknob, a quiet pit opening in her chest. Jonah walked up behind her carrying a box and read it aloud. "Haters gonna hate," he muttered, then pulled the flyer down. But Emily couldn't shake it. That afternoon, a man stormed into the basement during a consultation. Middle-aged, thick boots, camouflage jacket. "You turning this town into a surveillance outpost?" he shouted, pointing at the stack of Starlink minis. "Selling us off to Musk satellites?" Emily stood slowly from her chair, hands raised, voice steady. "We're helping people get online so they can go to school, work, get medical care. We don't need charity wrapped in corporate spyware," he yelled. "You think these things aren't watching us?" Before anyone could stop him, he knocked one of the boxes off the table and stormed out. The room sat in stunned silence. A mother and her teenage son, who had just finished their first video call tutorial, looked shaken. Emily took a breath and knelt down to pick up the device. No damage. Just fear left behind. That evening, Rachel called after hearing the story through a neighbor. "Do you want me to drive up?" she asked. "Just be there for a while." "No," Emily said quietly. "But thank you. I think I need to sit with this for a bit." She didn't sleep well. The next morning, she stood outside the church before unlocking the door and watched the clouds roll across the hills. She pulled out her phone and recorded a video. Just her, raw, no edits. "I've heard the fear," she began. "I've seen the pushback. And I understand it. Change is hard. But no one here is selling out our town. We're building it back up. I'm not a tech company. I'm your neighbor. These boxes aren't magic, but they're helping real people, people like your kids, your grandparents, your veterans. If you want to talk, come find me. I'll listen." She posted it and walked inside. The response surprised her. Dozens of supportive comments flooded in. "Thank you for standing tall. You're helping my sister's family in Red Bluff. She told me you saved her job. Ignore the noise. You're doing sacred work." Sacred work. That phrase stuck with her. A few days later, she got an invitation to speak at a regional education conference in Helena. The keynote slot. She almost declined, still shaken by the recent backlash, but Jonah pushed her. They need to hear it from someone who's felt both the resistance and the reward. So she packed a small bag, left the kids with Rachel for the weekend, and made the 4-hour drive west. She arrived at the conference center, a clean glass building that smelled like coffee and fresh paper. Rows of booths displayed flashy educational tech, VR headsets, software subscriptions, wireless routers with impossible speeds. She checked in, received her badge, Emily Carter, Project Signal, and took a deep breath. The conference coordinator gave her 15 minutes on stage. When she stepped up to the podium, a few hundred faces turned toward her. Most were teachers. Some administrators. A few curious tech reps. She began the way she always did, with a story. 3 months ago, she said, I watched a woman in her 70s see her son's face on a video call for the first time in over a year. She wept. She couldn't believe something so simple had taken so long to reach her. She told them about the torn flyer. The shouting man. The fear of being misunderstood. But here's what I know, she said. We can't let fear keep our communities disconnected. The longer we wait, the wider the gap gets. Her voice didn't shake. She was clear, composed, grounded in her truth. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Later, a superintendent from Wyoming approached her and said, You just described half my district. I need this. She handed him a Project Signal info packet and promised to follow up. By the time she returned home, her email was stacked with new inquiries. Her town's name, once a quiet dot on a forgotten map, was becoming a symbol of something else: resilience, innovation, possibility. Still, the resistance lingered. More whispers in the hardware store. A Facebook group questioning if satellites were safe. Someone even filed a complaint with the county council accusing Project Signal of corporate infiltration. Emily met with the council voluntarily. She sat in a folding chair across from 5 stone-faced officials and laid out everything: how Project Signal worked, who funded it, how many people had been helped. She brought testimonials, success rates, even a statement of non-affiliation from Starlink. When she finished, she looked them in the eye and said, I live here. I'm raising my kids here. I'm not a stranger to these hills. I just want to make life a little easier for the people who've always had to work twice as hard to be seen. After a pause, the head councilwoman nodded slowly. Thank you, Ms. Carter. That's all we needed. They voted to support her work officially. A small win. A big relief. That night, Emily sat on the porch with Jonah and Sarah, drinking tea under a wide purple sky. Think the stars can hear us? Sarah joked. Probably not, Jonah said. But our satellites might. They all laughed. Emily looked up and saw the faint glimmer of a satellite streak across the sky, quiet, fast, unseen by most. She smiled. Good. Let them listen. The unseen grid was growing, not just in signal strength, but in human connection. And she wasn't just part of it anymore. She was leading it. The first warning came as a weather alert on her phone: severe system expected in northwest Montana, wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour, potential power outages. Emily read it with one hand while making grilled cheese sandwiches with the other. It was a late Thursday afternoon in June, and the sky had already started turning that bruised color that always made her uneasy. A decade in rural Montana had taught her to take nature seriously, even when it started as a whisper. Max and Ellie were arguing over which episode of their favorite cartoon to stream, and the signal was holding fine, green light steady on the Starlink Mini, speeds as smooth as usual. But Emily's eyes kept drifting to the window, then to the alert again. By dinner, wind was howling against the eaves and the first flickers of power trouble arrived. The lights blinked once, twice. Then a pop from outside made the dog bark and Ellie clutch her arm. It's okay, Emily said, calmly lighting the battery-powered lantern she kept in the hallway closet. Just wind. We're prepared. And they were. She'd made sure of it ever since last winter, when a blizzard took out the power lines and they'd gone 40 hours without heat. The backup generator Carlos had helped her find online ran on propane and kicked on smoothly when the grid dipped. The Starlink Mini, powered through the inverter system, stayed online, though the speeds dipped occasionally when branches or heavy gusts hit just right. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. Still, outside, the storm was only getting worse. By midnight, local roads were closed, and the sheriff's department sent out a county-wide broadcast: "Stay indoors, possible flooding along the Flatwater Creek area." That meant 3 families she'd recently helped, one single mom with 2 small kids, one older couple with medical conditions, and one teenager caring for her grandmother, were now in danger of being completely cut off. Emily couldn't sleep. She paced. She watched the wind bend trees like straws and saw the outlines of things: lawn chairs, old buckets, even what looked like a piece of someone's roof, fly past the window. Then she did what she always did when the world tilted: she opened her laptop and checked in on people. The grid map Carlos had built for her, a digital pinboard of every mini location she'd helped install, glowed blue and green. Green meant stable. Blue meant operational with caution. She clicked on each dot, checking timestamps, running ping tests. Around 2:30 a.m., she got a ping from Brooke's family. Signal weak but holding. Safe. Basement. Then another from the single mom: lights out. Generator running. Mini saved us tonight. Can't believe it still works. And one more from the teenager caring for her grandmother: internet slower but still here. Grandmom's oxygen app is working. Thank you, Miss Emily. Emily exhaled slowly, tears springing to her eyes, not from fear now, but from something stronger. Relief. Validation. Proof. The grid was more than theory. It was protection. It was resilience. She sent check-in messages to every vulnerable contact she had, and by morning, she'd compiled a full status report to send to Carlos and Starlink's community team. 17 at-risk homes stayed connected through the storm, she wrote. 3 relied on the minis for medical monitoring. 1 kept a mental health session going during the first wave of outages. Natasha replied within the hour: "This is the data we dream of. You're building something that matters." But storms don't end neatly. The wind passed, but the aftermath lingered. Power was down in half the county for 2 days. Cell towers were spotty. And rumors began spreading. Someone posted a video of the Starlink dish swaying on a pole during the storm, adding the caption: "These things won't survive a real Montana winter, and you want us to rely on them?" Emily saw it go viral locally, hundreds of shares, angry comments, even a few calling her a tech shill or Elon's mouthpiece. It stung. Not because it was true, but because it gained traction. Even the school board, which had been working with her to expand Project Signal to other districts, paused their rollout, citing community feedback. Carlos called and said, "We've seen this before. New tech threatens the old rhythm, and people push back. But I'm not trying to change their rhythm," Emily said. "I'm just trying to give them options." "That's still change," he replied. And change never comes easy in places where survival has always meant sticking to what you know. She knew he was right, but it didn't make it easier to face. She found herself walking slower through town, making less eye contact at the post office, holding her breath when she overheard people talking at the diner. One woman even stood next to her in the coffee line and muttered, "Must be nice being the tech queen of the prairie." Emily didn't respond. She just took her coffee and walked out into the sun, which had finally returned, bright but uncomfortably sharp. That night, she called Rachel. "Why does it feel like helping people turns you into a target?" she asked. "Because it does," Rachel replied without hesitation. "People say they want help, but they don't want the reminder that they needed it. Pride gets tangled up with progress." "Should I stop?" Emily asked, voice small. "Absolutely not," Rachel said. "This town has been quiet for decades. You shook the ground. Let it rumble. Emily let that settle in. Maybe the storm had just revealed cracks that were always there, cracks in trust, in community memory, in the way people balanced independence and interdependence. Still, she didn't want to ignore those feelings. She wanted to face them. So she organized an open forum at the town hall. No agenda, no speeches. Just a big handwritten sign, "Let's talk about the signal." She invited everyone. Skeptics. Supporters. Curious bystanders. They came. Not all of them, but enough. She stood at the front with a flip chart and a calm tone. "I'm not here to sell anything," she began. "I'm here to listen. To answer questions. To explain what this technology can do, and what it can't." One man asked about privacy. A woman asked about solar flares. A rancher wanted to know if the satellite dish would interfere with his ham radio. Emily answered each honestly, not defensively. She acknowledged flaws, admitted when she didn't know something. She shared examples of lives changed, but didn't guilt anyone into agreeing with her. And slowly, the tone shifted. The energy softened. People started asking how they could help. "I've got a flatbed," one man said. "Could deliver some of those boxes up to the lake cabins." "My niece in Idaho wants one," said another. "Can I put her in touch with you?" Emily nodded, heart full. Before leaving, she stood near the door and shook every hand. Thanked every person. Promised to keep the dialogue open. She didn't win everyone over that night. But she built something far more powerful than agreement, she built understanding. And in small towns, that's where everything starts. The next morning, Max looked up from the newspaper he'd grabbed at the diner and said, "Mom, you're in here again." She raised an eyebrow. "Good or bad?" "Good. It says you're connecting the town." "Like, actually connecting it." Emily smiled and ruffled his hair. "We're connecting it," she said. "Together." And as she looked out the window and saw a neighbor installing a new Starlink dish with his teenage son, both smiling, both laughing, she realized that storms, while scary, had a way of clearing the air for something new to grow. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Summer was settling over Montana like a warm embrace, but for Emily, the real heat was in the momentum building around Project Signal. After the storm and the town hall, something shifted, barriers that had seemed immovable began to crack. Word was spreading fast, beyond the edges of her small town, catching the attention of other rural communities desperate for better internet. The state education department reached out with interest, and local businesses started asking how Starlink minis could improve their operations. But the most surprising breakthrough came from an unexpected corner, a meeting with the Crow Reservation's tribal leaders, held in a weathered community center painted with murals that told stories of resilience and tradition. Emily was nervous. She had grown up in Montana, but this was different. Different histories, different struggles, and a deep-rooted caution toward outsiders bearing technology promises. She had been introduced to Chief Red Eagle through a mutual friend who worked in regional outreach. The chief was a tall man, dignified yet approachable, with sharp eyes that seemed to weigh every word before allowing it passage. "We've been left behind before," he said during the first meeting, his voice low but firm. "Internet promised us connection, but what we got was neglect." Emily nodded, understanding the weight behind those words. "I don't want to repeat that history," she said. "Project Signal isn't just about technology. It's about giving communities control over their future." The chief leaned back, then surprised her by saying, "Show us." So she did. She arranged for a demo in one of the reservation's community centers. A small crowd gathered, elders, young adults, families, and Emily watched as the Starlink Mini connected, instantly streaming a video call with a health clinic in Billings. The faces on the screen were bright and clear, and as a nurse explained telemedicine services, an elder whispered, "This could save lives." Over the following weeks, Emily worked closely with tribal tech coordinators, learning about their needs, concerns, and hopes. They wanted connectivity that respected their culture, privacy, and sovereignty. They wanted to manage their own networks. Together, they designed a plan to install Starlink minis with local control hubs, ensuring data stayed within their jurisdiction and was governed by their own rules. This collaboration wasn't just business, it was a bridge of trust, painstakingly built over shared meals, long conversations, and mutual respect. The breakthrough opened new doors. Neighboring reservations, rural schools, and remote clinics reached out. Project Signal grew from a grassroots effort to a regional movement. Back home, Emily balanced the expansion with challenges. The equipment supply chain strained under demand. The Starlink satellite constellation was undergoing upgrades, causing intermittent outages. And the public's patience sometimes frayed, especially when unexpected delays hit. One afternoon, after a long day troubleshooting installation setbacks, Emily sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed orange and purple across the hills. Jonah joined her, handing her a mug of coffee. "You look beat," he said. "How do you keep going?" She smiled, tired but determined. "Because people depend on it. And because if I don't, who will?" He nodded, then added, "You're breaking barriers, technical, social, even emotional. That's not easy." "No, it's not," she agreed. "But it's necessary." That necessity became clearer when a local high school announced it would start offering virtual advanced placement classes through Project Signal. For students who had never had access to college-level coursework, this was a game-changer. Emily remembered one student, Mia, who confided during installation, "I want to be an engineer someday, but I didn't think I had the resources." Now Mia was enrolling in AP Physics online, her Starlink mini keeping her connected even during late-night study sessions. Emily's heart swelled with pride. But she also knew the journey wasn't over. In rural America, infrastructure wasn't just about cables and satellites, it was about dismantling long-standing barriers of isolation, skepticism, and limited opportunity. She received a call from a national news producer, interested in covering Project Signal's success. It was an opportunity to tell the story on a larger stage, but Emily hesitated. Public attention brought scrutiny, and she worried about the fragile trust she'd built. After talking it over with Rachel and Jonah, she agreed, believing the benefits outweighed the risks. The interview aired on a Sunday evening. Emily spoke candidly about the challenges and triumphs, about the storm that tested the minis, the community meetings that built understanding, the collaborations with tribal leaders. Viewers heard the voices of families who had gone from zero connectivity to full access. The response was overwhelming. Donations, volunteer offers, and equipment requests poured in. But with fame came new voices of doubt and criticism, concerns about data security, the environmental impact of satellites, the risk of corporate overreach. Emily faced them head-on in online forums and public panels, refusing to let fear derail progress. She emphasized transparency, invited experts to speak, and opened the Project Signal data for community review. Her message was simple: technology isn't a fix-all, but when combined with respect and collaboration, it can be a powerful tool for empowerment. By fall, the grid stretched further than Emily ever imagined, covering over 50 towns and communities across 3 states. She hired a small team of local technicians and coordinators to help manage installations and support. The dream of fast, reliable internet in even the most remote corners was no longer just an idea. It was reality. Yet, with growth came growing pains. Some rural internet providers pushed back, lobbying state officials to impose stricter regulations on satellite internet. Legal battles brewed. Emily spent days drafting letters and attending hearings, advocating for fair policies that balanced innovation with competition. She learned the politics of technology were as complex as the hardware itself. One late October evening, after a grueling hearing session, Emily sat alone in the office. The weight of months pressed down, exhaustion seeping through her bones. She pulled out a photo of her kids and held it close. For them, she whispered. For every kid who deserves a chance. In that quiet moment, she understood why her journey mattered. Because breaking barriers wasn't just about wires and signals, it was about hope, justice, and the future. And she was ready to keep fighting for it. The biting chill of early November crept across Montana's plains, and with it came the deepening silence that winter often draped over rural communities. For many, this silence was familiar: quiet roads, darkened windows, and the absence of the buzzing world beyond. But for Emily, silence was no longer the default. Her mission with Project Signal had created pockets of connectivity where none existed before, but now she was discovering just how fragile those signals could be when disaster struck in the dead of night. The call came just after midnight, a frantic voice crackling through her phone. "Emily, it's Jake. The clinic satellite link just dropped. We can't reach the emergency dispatch." Jake was the technician overseeing the installation at the Crow Reservation's health center. His voice was tense. "It's a complete blackout on the network. Patients depend on that connection for monitoring. We're blind here." Emily's heart sank. A satellite outage was never just a technical issue, it was a life-or-death situation when medical care was involved. She jumped out of bed, grabbing her jacket and laptop. The Starlink mini network was designed to be resilient, with multiple fallback systems, but this blackout felt different, larger, more ominous. As she worked through diagnostics remotely, the silence of her house felt heavier, the absence of humming machines unnerving. The outage was traced to a sudden solar storm, a burst of charged particles from the sun that had disrupted satellite communications across the northern hemisphere. It was a natural event scientists had anticipated, but the timing was brutal. Over the next 24 hours, Emily coordinated with Starlink engineers, tribal IT staff, and emergency responders, racing against the clock to restore the network. In the meantime, backup generators kept the clinic's equipment powered, but without reliable internet, doctors resorted to manual logs and phone calls, slow and frustrating. The community felt the impact. School schedules were disrupted as virtual classes went dark, businesses lost orders, and families struggled to stay connected with loved ones elsewhere. Yet, amidst the frustration, Emily witnessed resilience. Jake sent updates showing the tribal tech team working around the clock, using mobile hotspots and satellite phones as temporary fixes. The elders organized a communal check-in system, where neighbors checked on each other in person or by battery-powered radios. Emily realized the silence had rekindled an old kind of connection, one rooted in human presence and care. But she also knew that reliance on these backup methods was unsustainable in a world increasingly dependent on digital links. When the Starlink network finally flickered back to life, the relief was palpable. Messages flooded in from grateful families, schools resumed online learning, and the clinic reported normal operations. Emily sat back, exhausted but determined. The solar storm was a reminder. Technology, no matter how advanced, was vulnerable. It needed to be part of a broader ecosystem of support and preparedness. That morning, she penned a proposal for a new phase of Project Signal, one focused on redundancy and hybrid solutions. She envisioned community tech hubs equipped with solar power backups, satellite-to-ground relay stations, and training programs for local technicians to handle outages swiftly. She shared her plan with Chief Red Eagle, who responded with cautious optimism. "We've survived storms before. We'll survive this one, too. But your idea of blending new tech with old wisdom, that speaks to us." The collaboration deepened, and soon they were working on installing additional infrastructure designed to weather both natural and technological storms. At the same time, Emily confronted the emotional toll of the blackout. She had seen firsthand how the loss of connectivity could isolate, frighten, and disrupt. For Ellie and Max, the blackout had meant no streaming shows, no video calls with cousins in Chicago, no access to their favorite games. Emily had spent hours inventing analog distractions, board games, storytelling, backyard stargazing, but she knew the digital world was a big part of their lives. One evening, after tucking them into bed, Emily caught Ellie's eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Will the internet always come back, Mom?" she asked quietly. "It will, sweetheart. Sometimes it takes longer than we want. But we'll be ready next time." Emily's promise was more than reassurance, it was a vow to build a future where silence was not the default but a choice, one made on their terms. As the weeks passed, Emily organized community workshops on digital literacy and emergency preparedness. She invited experts in cybersecurity, renewable energy, and disaster response to share knowledge and empower residents. These sessions became a space where questions were welcomed and fears addressed openly. Residents who had once viewed the Starlink minis with suspicion now came forward with ideas on improving resilience and sharing resources. The project was no longer just about technology, it was about community empowerment. Meanwhile, Emily juggled the complexities of scaling Project Signal beyond Montana. She attended conferences and met with policymakers in Washington, D.C., advocating for federal support of rural broadband and infrastructure innovation. She encountered both allies and skeptics, some who championed satellite technology as a game changer, others who pushed for traditional fiber optics. The debates were intense, but Emily's message remained steady: no single solution fits all. Rural America needed a patchwork of technologies tailored to local needs, with communities leading the way. Back home, as snow began to dust the landscape, Emily reflected on the season's lessons. The solar storm had been a setback, but it had also sparked growth, in technology, in relationships, in resolve. She thought of the people she'd met and worked alongside, the tech coordinators on the reservation, the school teachers adapting to new platforms, the families finding ways to connect despite outages. Each signal restored was more than data transmitted, it was trust rebuilt, hope renewed. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a grandmother living miles from the nearest town. She wrote about how the Starlink Mini had allowed her to video chat with her grandchildren for the first time in years. "You brought light to our quiet world," she wrote. Emily read the letter twice, feeling a warmth that no winter chill could touch. The journey was far from over, but moments like these made every challenge worthwhile. As the chapter closed on another year, Emily stood on the porch watching the stars twinkle with a clarity she'd never taken for granted before. The satellites above were more than metal and code, they were threads weaving communities together across distances, breaking the silence one signal at a time. And Emily was at the heart of that transformation, steady, hopeful, unstoppable. The first frost of winter had settled over the rolling plains, frosting the edges of Emily's world with sharp, shimmering edges. Despite the cold creeping in, there was an undeniable warmth in the communities connected by Project Signal, a warmth born from hope, progress, and the undeniable pull of change. Emily had spent months building not just networks of satellites and hardware but networks of trust, collaboration, and shared dreams. But waves of change, like the winter wind, carried both promise and challenge, and Emily was about to face both in equal measure. As word spread about the successes of Starlink Mini, requests poured in from places Emily hadn't even considered: remote farms in Wyoming, isolated mountain cabins in Idaho, and even small schools tucked in the vast Nebraska prairies. The appetite for fast, reliable internet was ravenous, driven not just by necessity but by a hunger to connect, to learn, to grow. Yet with expansion came complexity. Supply chains groaned under the weight of demand, pushing delivery dates months out. Satellite capacity needed to keep pace with skyrocketing usage. Local governments debated the merits and risks of new infrastructure, sometimes welcoming, sometimes wary. Emily found herself navigating a maze of logistics, politics, and human emotion. One chilly morning, Emily flew to Cheyenne, Wyoming, for a meeting with a coalition of ranchers and farmers skeptical of satellite internet. They gathered in a dusty old community hall where decades of conversation had echoed but where modern promises met stubborn tradition. The room buzzed with questions, doubts, and memories of past letdowns. Why should we trust something that comes from outer space when the last cable companies left us hanging, grumbled Tom Harris, a grizzled cattle rancher with sun-leathered skin and a wary gaze. Emily listened carefully, feeling the weight of his words. Because we built this project to put you in control, she answered. Starlink Mini isn't just about satellites, it's about giving you the tools and knowledge to connect on your terms. She showed them how the devices were easy to install, required minimal maintenance, and could be managed locally. She shared stories from the Crow Reservation about how the community had taken ownership, not just as consumers but as partners. Slowly, the mood shifted. Farmers who once muttered doubts began asking how the technology could help with precision agriculture, livestock monitoring, and online markets. Ranchers spoke of their grandchildren needing access to advanced education and opportunities beyond the fences. Emily realized these conversations were more than sales pitches, they were the first waves of transformation, breaking old patterns and inviting new futures. But change wasn't always smooth. One afternoon, a local news story emerged, highlighting concerns about the environmental impact of the increasing number of satellites orbiting Earth. Critics warned of space clutter and risks to astronomy. Social media lit up with debates, some praising innovation, others fearing unintended consequences. Emily felt the pressure mounting. She scheduled a live panel discussion featuring space scientists, environmental experts, and Starlink engineers. Together, they addressed questions candidly: the measures taken to deorbit defunct satellites safely, efforts to reduce reflectivity, and the ongoing commitment to sustainability. The conversation wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Emily knew that transparency and dialogue were essential to maintaining trust in a world wary of rapid technological change. Meanwhile, back in Montana, Emily focused on strengthening community ties. She launched a pilot program training local youth as connectivity ambassadors, equipping them with skills in installation, troubleshooting, and digital literacy. These ambassadors became vital links between Project Signal and residents, especially older adults hesitant about new technology. Ellie and Max eagerly joined the program, proud to contribute to their community's growth. One evening, at a holiday gathering, Emily watched as her children helped an elderly neighbor set up a tablet, patiently explaining video calls and online safety. The scene filled her with quiet joy. Project Signal was no longer just a project, it was a living, breathing part of the community fabric. However, the waves of change rippled beyond technology. Emily noticed shifts in the local economy, small businesses expanding online, artisans selling crafts to national markets, telehealth services reducing the need for long drives to clinics. Education blossomed with virtual classrooms, advanced courses, and access to global resources. The internet was a lifeline and a launchpad. Yet, amid these gains, challenges lingered. Broadband access alone couldn't erase decades of economic disparity or isolation. Some families still struggled with the cost of devices, digital skills, or even electricity reliability. Emily recognized that connectivity was a piece of a larger puzzle requiring ongoing effort and compassion. One snowy morning, Emily received a call from a teacher at a small rural school in Montana. The school had just lost its funding for a much-needed math program, and students were at risk of falling behind. Emily knew that education was one of the most powerful engines of change. She coordinated with a nonprofit partner to provide tablets, access to online tutoring, and interactive courses through Project Signal. The response was immediate and inspiring. Students like Mia, who had dreamed of becoming an engineer, found new resources to fuel their ambitions. Teachers reported renewed enthusiasm and engagement. For Emily, these stories were the true measure of success. But not all waves were gentle. As winter deepened, Emily grappled with burnout. The relentless pace, the weight of responsibility, and the constant push against obstacles wore on her spirit. There were nights she lay awake, questioning if her efforts were enough, if the promises made were realistic. Jonah noticed and offered quiet support, reminding her of the impact they had already achieved. "Change is never easy," he said. "But you're steering the ship through rough seas." Keep going. Those words steadied her. Emily realized that waves of change didn't just reshape communities, they reshaped her, too. They demanded resilience, patience, and unwavering faith in the vision. As the year closed, Project Signal had become a beacon across the region, illuminating possibilities and challenging limits. Emily stood at the crossroads of past and future, knowing that each connected home, each empowered student, and each strengthened community was a testament to the power of connection. Outside, snowflakes swirled like whispers of the coming spring, carrying with them the promise of new waves, new horizons, and the enduring human drive to reach beyond the silence into light. The soft hum of the Starlink minis blended into the quiet mornings of rural Montana, a gentle but persistent signal threading through the crisp air like a lifeline to the world beyond. Emily had come to realize that the technology she helped deploy was more than hardware and software, it was a beacon, an echo of the future reaching into places long forgotten by the digital age. As the project expanded, the stories of transformation multiplied, rippling outward like concentric waves across the heartland. One such story came unexpectedly from a small town nestled near the edge of Glacier National Park, where a local librarian named Sarah had used the newfound connectivity to launch a virtual mentorship program for teenagers. Sarah's library had been a sanctuary for generations, but with limited resources and dwindling visitors, it struggled to stay relevant. The introduction of Starlink Mini changed everything. Teens once confined by geography could now connect with professionals, artists, scientists, and entrepreneurs across the country. The library became a hub of ideas, creativity, and ambition. Emily read emails from Sarah filled with gratitude and hope. "You've given these kids a voice and a future," Sarah wrote. It was a simple message but powerful enough to bring tears to Emily's eyes. Echoes of these futures reverberated in other corners of the network, an elderly farmer learning to track market prices in real time, a single mother running an online business to support her family, a young artist streaming performances to audiences thousands of miles away. Each signal carried a story of resilience and reinvention. Yet, the future was never static. The rapid adoption of Starlink Mini exposed new questions and dilemmas. Privacy concerns surfaced as more data flowed through satellites and community hubs. Local governments debated regulations to balance innovation with protection. Emily found herself mediating these discussions, emphasizing transparency, consent, and community control. The goal was clear: technology should empower, not exploit. One evening, as Emily prepared for a national conference on rural connectivity, she received an unexpected visit from Dr. Raj Patel, a researcher studying the social impact of satellite internet. Raj was a thoughtful man with sharp intellect and a gentle demeanor, intrigued by Project Signal's grassroots approach. Over coffee, he shared insights that both challenged and inspired Emily. "Connectivity isn't just about speed or coverage," he said. "It's about how communities adapt, how culture evolves, and how people redefine their place in the world." He spoke of digital inclusion as a living process, one requiring ongoing dialogue, education, and ethical stewardship. Emily nodded, realizing how much she had learned from the very communities she served. This was not a top-down mission but a shared journey, full of surprises and lessons. At the conference, Emily presented Project Signal's progress, weaving technical achievements with human stories. She spoke about the power of small devices connecting vast landscapes, the importance of local leadership, and the responsibility to honor diverse voices. The audience responded with enthusiasm, and Emily forged new partnerships with nonprofits, policymakers, and technology innovators. But the echoes of tomorrow also brought reflections on sustainability. Starlink minis, though revolutionary, relied on complex supply chains and energy consumption. Emily initiated collaborations with environmental experts to explore greener technologies, solar-powered units, recyclable components, and ways to minimize space debris. It was a commitment to the future in every sense. Back home, Emily's children, Ellie and Max, continued to grow alongside the network. They often accompanied her on site visits, curious and eager to learn. Ellie's dreams of engineering seemed within reach now, fueled by access to resources and mentors. Max, inspired by local artists streaming through the minis, discovered a passion for music production. Emily watched with pride as they navigated this connected world with wonder and wisdom. Yet, amid progress, Emily never lost sight of the quiet moments, the look of awe on a child's face when a video call connected distant relatives, the relief of a doctor accessing patient records instantly, the joy of a farmer managing crops with precision. These moments were the true echoes of tomorrow, whispers of hope, resilience, and shared humanity. As spring approached, Project Signal prepared to expand into new regions, facing fresh challenges but armed with lessons learned and a vision renewed. Emily felt the weight of responsibility but also the exhilaration of possibility. She knew that the journey was far from over, but with every signal sent and received, every barrier broken and bridge built, the future was being rewritten. In the quiet of one early morning, standing beneath a sky streaked with dawn's light, Emily whispered a vow, to listen to the echoes, to honor the stories they carried, and to keep building a world where connection was not a luxury but a right. The echoes of tomorrow were not distant, they were here, ringing clear in every heartbeat, every signal, every life touched by the invisible threads of the Starlink Mini. Emily stood at the threshold of yet another frontier, where technology and humanity intertwined in a delicate dance. Project Signal had evolved from a bold experiment into a sprawling network bridging vast rural landscapes, but with growth came new crossroads, decisions that would shape the very nature of connection for years to come. The morning light filtered through the window of her modest office, illuminating blueprints, reports, and maps strewn across her desk. Among the papers lay a proposal for expanding Starlink mini coverage into several underserved tribal communities farther west, areas rich in culture but isolated by geography and history. The opportunity was immense, but so were the challenges. These communities carried deep-rooted concerns about external influence and control, memories of broken promises and cultural erasure still fresh beneath the surface. Emily knew that success here would depend on more than technology. It required trust, respect, and genuine partnership. She reached out to tribal leaders, inviting them to the table not as recipients but as equal architects of their digital futures. Early meetings were cautious, sometimes tense, but always honest. Chief Red Eagle, a steadfast and eloquent leader, reminded Emily that connection was as much about preserving identity as it was about embracing progress. "Our traditions are the roots of who we are," he said. "The internet must not uproot us but help us grow." Inspired by this vision, Emily proposed a collaborative framework. Project Signal would provide technology and training, but control over content, access, and community management would remain local. The plan included cultural preservation programs, digital archiving of languages and stories, and educational initiatives celebrating heritage alongside innovation. As these conversations unfolded, Emily traveled extensively, meeting with elders, educators, youth, and activists. Each encounter enriched her understanding, revealing the complexity and beauty of the communities she hoped to serve. She realized that the crossroads were not obstacles but invitations to listen deeply and co-create solutions that honored both past and future. Meanwhile, on the technical front, the team faced hurdles adapting the Starlink minis to the rugged terrain and variable climate. Engineers developed ruggedized units with enhanced power systems and weatherproofing. Local technicians underwent intensive training to ensure self-sufficiency in maintenance and troubleshooting. The process was iterative, marked by trial, error, and innovation. Emily witnessed firsthand how community members embraced the technology, balancing curiosity with caution. Youth eager to explore the digital world paired with elders guiding them with wisdom. This dynamic interplay underscored the essence of connection, intergenerational, intercultural, and deeply human. Yet, amid progress, the crossroads extended beyond local communities. National policymakers and industry leaders debated the role of satellite internet in the broader telecommunications landscape. Questions of regulation, competition, and equity filled conference rooms and legislative chambers. Emily found herself advocating fiercely for rural voices, emphasizing that connectivity was a civil right, not a luxury. She argued that inclusive policies must prioritize accessibility, affordability, and community empowerment. These efforts yielded mixed results but planted seeds of awareness and change. In quieter moments, Emily grappled with personal crossroads as well. The relentless pace of her work strained relationships and tested resilience. Jonah, ever supportive, urged her to find balance, to nurture not only the project but also herself and her family. Together, they carved out spaces for rest, laughter, and connection beyond screens and satellites. Ellie and Max thrived in this environment of possibility and care, their dreams expanding alongside the networks they grew up with. One evening, Emily reflected on the journey from the first flickering signals to the complex web spanning diverse communities. The crossroads ahead were daunting but filled with promise. She knew that technology alone could not bridge divides or heal wounds, but paired with empathy, respect, and shared vision, it could open doors once thought sealed. The chapter closed on a note of determination and hope. Emily stood poised at the crossroads of connection, ready to walk forward with courage and humility, guided by the voices and dreams of those she served. The path was not always clear, but with every step, the invisible threads of Starlink Mini wove stronger, knitting together a tapestry of human potential and possibility. Emily woke to the shrill ring of her phone, the early dawn barely illuminating the Montana sky. The voice on the other end was urgent. A regional hospital in a remote town was struggling with outdated communication systems, impacting critical patient care. For Emily, this was more than a technical issue, it was a call to break yet another barrier between isolation and connection. Starlink Mini had already transformed homes, schools, and businesses, but healthcare remained one of the most urgent frontiers. Rural clinics and hospitals often lacked reliable internet, hampering telemedicine, data sharing, and emergency response. Emily mobilized her team immediately, coordinating with hospital administrators and medical staff to deploy customized Starlink Minis capable of handling sensitive data and critical applications. The installation was swift but meticulous, prioritizing security and stability. Within days, the hospital's connectivity transformed. Doctors consulted specialists across states in real time. Patients accessed virtual appointments without long, exhausting trips. Medical records updated instantly, reducing errors and delays. The impact was tangible, life-saving. One case stood out, a young boy in need of urgent neurological evaluation. Through a Starlink Mini connection, specialists thousands of miles away guided local doctors in diagnosis and treatment, a partnership that saved the boy's life. News of these breakthroughs spread rapidly, fueling demand for similar solutions in other healthcare settings. But breaking barriers was not without resistance. Some medical professionals voiced concerns about data privacy, system reliability, and the learning curve for new technologies. Emily understood these worries and doubled down on training programs, cybersecurity measures, and user-friendly interfaces. She brought in healthcare IT experts to tailor solutions, ensuring the technology served rather than complicated care. Beyond healthcare, Starlink Mini began to break barriers in education and economic opportunity. Remote classrooms flourished with interactive lessons, virtual field trips, and access to global knowledge. Farmers leveraged real-time weather data and market analytics to optimize yields. Entrepreneurs launched e-commerce ventures that connected local products to national and international buyers. These successes reinforced the idea that connectivity was a catalyst for breaking down long-standing divides. Yet, not all barriers were technical. Social and cultural divides required patience, understanding, and inclusion. Emily encouraged community dialogues to address concerns about change, digital equity, and the preservation of local identities. She supported initiatives that blended tradition with innovation, empowering communities to define their own digital futures. On a personal level, Emily found strength in her own network, Jonah's unwavering support, Ellie and Max's boundless curiosity, and the friendships forged through shared purpose. These relationships became anchors amid the storms of challenge and change. One afternoon, Emily visited a high school where students used Starlink Mini to collaborate on a regional environmental project. Watching them connect with peers across different states, sharing data and ideas, she felt a surge of hope. The barriers of distance, background, and circumstance were yielding to connection and creativity. As the sun set over Montana's vast skies, Emily stood on a hill overlooking a patchwork of farms, towns, and forests now linked by invisible threads of light. The journey to break barriers was ongoing, filled with complexity and triumph. But with each connection made, each life touched, the future grew brighter and more inclusive. The barriers that once seemed insurmountable were giving way to the enduring power of human connection. The wind had shifted, carrying with it the scent of change. Emily felt it in the way the communities around her began to evolve, as if the invisible web woven by Starlink Mini was not just connecting places but turning tides in the very rhythm of life. The turning point came unexpectedly, when a wildfire broke out near a small town in Montana, threatening homes, wildlife, and livelihoods. Emergency services struggled to coordinate due to patchy communication, and residents faced uncertainty and fear. That day, the true power of the Starlink Mini network revealed itself. Satellites overhead provided real-time data on the fire's spread. Locally installed units maintained connectivity when cell towers faltered. Firefighters and officials shared updates instantly, organizing evacuations and resources with unprecedented speed. Emily watched as the network became a lifeline, a force multiplier against disaster. The crisis underscored a vital lesson: connection was survival. As the fire was contained, gratitude poured in from residents, officials, and responders. Stories of lives saved and communities protected spread across social media and news outlets. For Emily, the moment crystallized the profound responsibility and potential of her work. But the turning tides were not only about emergencies. They echoed in quieter but equally profound ways. Schools embraced hybrid learning models, blending in-person and virtual instruction tailored to students' needs. Local businesses adapted by expanding online presence, reaching customers beyond traditional boundaries. Healthcare providers integrated telemedicine into routine care, improving outcomes and access. These changes reflected a broader cultural shift, one toward resilience, adaptability, and hope. Emily found herself mentoring a new generation of innovators inspired by Project Signal's impact. Young engineers, community leaders, and entrepreneurs sought guidance on harnessing technology for social good. The ripple effect was undeniable. Yet, with opportunity came complexity. The increased reliance on digital infrastructure raised questions about security, equity, and sustainability. Cybersecurity threats loomed, demanding vigilance and innovation. Ensuring that marginalized groups benefited equitably required ongoing attention and resources. Emily and her team embraced these challenges, partnering with experts and communities to build robust, inclusive systems. On a personal level, Emily felt the tides turning within herself. The burnout and doubt of earlier days gave way to renewed purpose and confidence. She embraced balance, valuing moments of connection with Jonah, Ellie, and Max as sources of strength. Together, they navigated the tides of change with resilience and love. One evening, standing on a bluff overlooking the town bathed in twilight, Emily reflected on the journey. The waves of connection had indeed turned tides, not just in technology but in hearts and lives. The future remained uncertain, full of challenges and promise. But as long as the invisible threads of Starlink Mini held strong, so too would the communities it touched. The tides were turning, and with them, the story of connection, hope, and transformation. Emily had always believed technology was a bridge, a way to connect not just places, but people, cultures, and dreams. As Project Signal expanded, this belief deepened into a mission to bridge worlds that had long existed in parallel, often disconnected and misunderstood. One such world was the intersection between urban innovation hubs and remote rural communities. The former buzzed with startups, investors, and cutting-edge research, the latter with tradition, close-knit bonds, and resourcefulness born of necessity. Starlink Mini, with its compact form and super-fast speeds, began to dissolve the walls between these worlds. A young software developer in San Francisco collaborated with a group of Native American artisans miles away, creating an online marketplace that celebrated indigenous crafts while providing sustainable income. High school students in Appalachia connected with mentors in Silicon Valley, sparking aspirations that once seemed unreachable. Emily saw how these bridges fostered mutual respect and exchange. The urbanites learned from the resilience and wisdom of rural communities, the rural folk gained access to tools and opportunities that expanded horizons. However, bridging worlds also meant navigating tensions. Skepticism arose on both sides. Urban dwellers sometimes misunderstood rural lifestyles, while rural residents questioned the pace and implications of rapid technological change. Emily facilitated dialogues and workshops that emphasized listening and empathy, helping stakeholders find common ground. One memorable encounter was with Mia, a young activist from a small town in West Virginia, who voiced concerns about cultural erosion and environmental impacts. Emily listened carefully, acknowledging the validity of Mia's fears and working with her to integrate sustainable practices and local voices into Project Signal's expansion. This partnership exemplified the power of bridging worlds, where collaboration replaced division, and technology served community values. On the technical front, engineers developed new features for Starlink Mini to support multilingual interfaces and offline content caching, ensuring accessibility even where internet was intermittent. They piloted educational programs that combined traditional knowledge with digital literacy, creating rich, hybrid curricula. Emily also championed initiatives to document and preserve endangered languages and histories, supported by the very network connecting distant homes. The human stories behind these efforts were powerful. Elderly storytellers recorded oral histories streamed to classrooms thousands of miles away. Children learned songs and customs digitally transmitted from elders. Artisans shared techniques and inspirations via virtual workshops. These connections deepened identity while fostering global awareness. Meanwhile, Emily's own family embodied this bridging of worlds. Ellie, now a budding engineer, collaborated with peers worldwide on open-source projects. Max, inspired by diverse music shared through the network, experimented with blending genres and cultures. Jonah supported their growth, reminding Emily that the roots of connection began at home. As Project Signal entered its next phase, Emily knew that bridging worlds was both a challenge and a promise. It required humility, patience, and an unwavering commitment to inclusivity. But the rewards were undeniable, a richer, more interconnected human tapestry, woven through the threads of Starlink Mini. In a world often divided, these bridges were lifelines of hope and understanding. Standing at a community event where artisans, engineers, students, and elders gathered, Emily felt the profound truth of her mission. Technology had become more than tools and signals, it was a conduit for shared stories, dreams, and futures. The worlds were bridged, not erased, and in that delicate balance lay the beauty of connection. Emily gazed out at the vast Montana plains as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields. The horizon was a symbol, a line that separated the known from the unknown, the present from the future. With Starlink Mini's expanding reach, Emily was no longer just connecting isolated places, she was enabling access to unseen horizons, opportunities and challenges humanity had only just begun to explore. The network's potential stretched far beyond convenience or speed. It was about unlocking creativity, innovation, and human potential in ways previously unimaginable. In a small-town school, teachers integrated virtual reality experiences powered by Starlink Mini, transporting students to historical sites, distant planets, and scientific laboratories without leaving their classrooms. In another corner of the country, entrepreneurs launched startups from garages and basements, leveraging global markets once out of reach. Emily saw how these unseen horizons inspired dreams as much as they expanded practical possibilities. Yet with every new horizon came new questions. The digital divide, though narrowing, still persisted in pockets, reminding Emily of the ongoing work needed to achieve true equity. Privacy and security remained critical concerns, especially as data flowed more freely across networks. There was a growing awareness that technology was not neutral, it reflected the values and choices of those who shaped it. Emily committed herself to embedding ethics and responsibility into every phase of Project Signal. She partnered with ethicists, community leaders, and technologists to develop frameworks that ensured technology served humanity's best interests. This included transparent data policies, community governance models, and educational campaigns about digital rights. Meanwhile, the unseen horizons were not confined to Earth. Space itself beckoned as a frontier. Elon Musk's vision of a multiplanetary future found resonance in the expansion of Starlink Mini. Satellites in low Earth orbit were no longer just communication tools but stepping stones to interplanetary connectivity. Emily felt a thrill imagining the day when isolated outposts on Mars or the Moon might rely on networks she helped build on Earth. Closer to home, environmental monitoring through satellite data enabled communities to respond proactively to climate change. Farmers adapted to shifting weather patterns with precision agriculture, reducing waste and conserving resources. Conservationists tracked endangered species and ecosystems, informing strategies to protect them. The network's invisible threads wove a new fabric of awareness and action. At the community level, Emily witnessed how Starlink Mini fostered resilience. In one town recovering from a devastating flood, the network supported disaster response and recovery efforts, connecting survivors to aid and rebuilding resources. The experience underscored that connectivity was not just a convenience but a foundation for hope and renewal. Through all these advances, Emily remained grounded in the human stories. The lives transformed, the dreams ignited, the bonds strengthened. Ellie and Max grew into young adults shaped by these possibilities, embodying the spirit of exploration and compassion that defined Project Signal. As Emily reflected on the journey, she understood that the unseen horizons were both a metaphor and a reality. They challenged her to keep pushing boundaries while honoring the diverse, complex human experiences at the heart of connection. The future was vast and uncertain, but it brimmed with promise. With Starlink Mini's light guiding the way, those horizons were no longer out of reach but invitations to discover, create, and belong. Emily stood at the precipice of what felt like the culmination of years of relentless work, a final push toward realizing the full potential of Starlink Mini. The project had grown from a modest pilot to a sprawling network touching thousands of lives, but the journey was far from over. The last mile remained the most difficult. Reaching the most remote, underserved pockets where connectivity was still a dream. The challenge was multifaceted: geographic obstacles, limited infrastructure, skepticism born from years of neglect. But Emily was undeterred. She believed in the transformative power of connection, and this belief propelled her and her team forward. Intensive planning sessions gave way to rapid deployment phases. Portable kits were refined for quick setup in harsh environments. Training programs expanded to empower local technicians, ensuring sustainability. Partnerships with non-profit organizations, government agencies, and private sectors multiplied. Yet, as momentum built, unexpected hurdles emerged. Regulatory delays threatened deployment schedules. Supply chain disruptions slowed equipment production. Cybersecurity threats grew more sophisticated. Emily faced these obstacles with grit and adaptability, rallying her team and allies to innovate solutions on the fly. Communication became paramount, transparent updates and collaborative problem-solving ensured trust and resilience. Throughout this final push, Emily never lost sight of the people behind the technology. She traveled extensively, visiting newly connected communities and witnessing firsthand the impact of Starlink Mini. Families reunited over video calls, farmers accessed crucial market data, students completed homework with newfound ease. Each story fueled her determination. One particularly poignant moment came during a visit to a mountainous village where an elderly couple used the network to reconnect with distant relatives for the first time in decades. Their tears and laughter epitomized the heart of the mission. At the same time, Emily balanced the demands of leadership with personal challenges. The weight of responsibility, long hours, and high stakes tested her endurance. Jonah's steady presence and the support of Ellie and Max reminded her of the importance of grounding herself in love and family. She learned to delegate, trust her team, and embrace imperfection as part of progress. As the final installations went live, a sense of accomplishment mingled with anticipation. The network's reach expanded exponentially, promising to reshape lives, economies, and communities. Emily knew this was more than technology, it was a lifeline, a beacon of opportunity and inclusion. The final push was not an end but a beginning. The network would continue to evolve, shaped by those it served and the challenges ahead. For Emily, the journey reaffirmed a timeless truth: connection was not just about wires or signals but about people, hope, and the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. The moment Emily had long envisioned had finally arrived, a new beginning not just for Starlink Mini, but for countless lives forever changed by the promise of connection. As she stood on a stage at the project's grand unveiling event, surrounded by community leaders, engineers, and families who had been part of the journey, Emily felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The story of Starlink Mini was no longer just about technology, it was about love, resilience, and the enduring human spirit that thrives when barriers fall away. The event buzzed with energy and hope. Testimonials echoed from families who now enjoyed video calls with distant relatives, farmers who optimized harvests with real-time weather updates, and students whose education no longer stalled for lack of access. Each story wove together a tapestry of progress and possibility. Emily's speech captured the essence of this transformation. She spoke of the challenges overcome, the lessons learned, and the vision that kept them moving forward. But more importantly, she spoke to the heart of what Starlink Mini represented: a bridge to new opportunities, a tool to empower, and a reminder that technology's greatest purpose is to serve humanity. The audience responded with applause and tears, recognizing the shared journey and the road ahead. Behind the scenes, Emily reflected on the personal growth that had accompanied the project. The long hours, the setbacks, and the breakthroughs had shaped her into a leader who understood the value of patience, empathy, and collaboration. Jonah, Ellie, and Max stood beside her, each proud and inspired by the difference their family had helped create. The new beginning was also a call to action. Emily emphasized that connection was a foundation, not a destination. The work to ensure equitable access, security, and innovation must continue. Communities would lead the way, shaping technology to meet their evolving needs. Emily's closing words lingered in the air: life is full of surprises, but love will always lead the way. As the event concluded, the celebration spilled into neighborhoods, classrooms, and living rooms connected by the very network they had built. Emily knew that Starlink Mini was more than a product, it was a movement. A movement fueled by dreams, grounded in reality, and driven by the unbreakable human desire to connect. The future stretched before her, vast, uncertain, and ripe with possibility. But with every connection made, every barrier broken, a new beginning was born. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?